Hey, merely knowing your rights, the verbiage of the right, or that the right exists, or that the right applies to certain circumstance, is not sufficient for you to not be taken advantage of. There are people who know that they have the right to bear arms, but are still being charged with gun charges on a federal and common law at the state level. There are people who know that there cannot be corruption of blood and forfeiture of state, yet their children are being taken away from them, yet their properties, their lands, their houses, their vehicles are being stripped away from them. There are people who know that taxation is not correct based on how Congress has been delegated the ability to do so and no one else can. The different types of taxation, yet they pay sales tax, yet they pay taxation in the form of registration every year, yet they get taxed on their properties and their effects. For those of us who know that we have the right to privacy, that we have the right to create our own instruments, before you go running around creating, quote, private IDs, you probably should learn about the tricks and traps that's been set for you trying to free yourself, right? There's a lot of traps. Somebody has misled you and told you, oh yeah, see that way right there? That's the way you should go. That's the correct angle. And you've been taking that path over and over and you realize, wait, this is not right. So you turn around and you try to take the right path. Know that the man or woman or group or body that led you astray, whether by omission of the truth or willful misinformation, they have predicted that just in case this man or woman figures it out on his or her way back to common sense and reality, let's set traps along the way. If you step in it, you're gone. And part of the reason why you're going to step in is because you're just not aware of its presence. That happens. In some cases, even if you know that it exists, you don't know exactly where and how. I'm here to show you that when it comes to right to privacy and creating your own instrument. Public Law 97-398, enacted December 31st, 1982. 96 Statute 2009. An act. This is the public statute, the public law on the United States level. The same applies in the common laws of each state. But see, those driver's licenses and IDs are nonetheless properties of United States. The state IDs, properties of the independent states. But see, that driver's license of the state of so-and-so, it's been homogenized into the United States. But nonetheless, on the state level, there's an equivalent version regarding the state ID. So, you want to create your own ID, right? You can do that. But know this first before you run around trying to create your own ID. Being enacted by Senate and House of Representatives of the United States of America. The Congress assembled, the proper format that's delegated the power to create laws according to the Constitution. That this act may be cited as False Identification Crime Control Act of 1982. Section 2, Chapter 47 of Title 18, Title 18 being Criminal Codes, of the United States Code is amended by adding at the end the following. Subsection 1028. Fraud and related activity in connection with identification documents. Whoever, in a circumstance described in subsection C of this section, let's go to subsection C. What does subsection C say? The circumstances referred to in section A of this section, that the identification document or false identification document, meaning they're trying to qualify or they're letting you know what qualifies as the false identification document in order for you to be charged with a fine and sentencing standard within this public law. The identification document or false identification documents is or appears to be issued by or under the authority of the United States, or the document making implement is designed or suited for making such an identification document or false identification document. What Dave just told you in a very, very, very simple term is if you have an ID that looks like that of United States creation, it is a false ID. Meaning all those IDs, only we have copyrighted interests. Only we have first lien interests on its design because it's our idea and our original intellectual creation. When you create your IDs, if you mimic the appearance of any United States document, it is a conflict of their commercial interests. And if it gets in the hand of one of their agents, they're coming after you with this code. So let's go back to A. Whoever in circumstances described in subsection C of this section, knowingly without lawful authority, produces an identification document or a false identification document which we've qualified and defined, knowingly transfers an identification document, a false document, knowing that such document was stolen or produced without lawful authority. You've qualified what that meant. And then you possess it with the intent of transfer. You possess it for use. You produce, transfer, or possess it if you've created your own private ID, or if you possess it and use it in any manner, and it appears similar to that of the United States, there's issues. Its appearance is where the key and liability is. It must not appear like theirs. It must be distinct and different. The punishment for an offense under subsection A of this section is a fine of not more than $25,000 or imprisonment of not more than 5 years, or both if the offense is a production or transfer of an identification document or false identification document that is or appears to be an identification issued by or under the authority of the United States. It must not have anything regarding the United States on it. A birth certificate or a driver's license or personal identification card. And if you have your personal identification card and it looks like that of the United States in any way, in appearance, in verbiage, $25,000 charge or 5-year imprisonment. And then they go on with the list of the details involved. But the key here is the appearance of it. It must not be a semblance of that of the United States, aka your state driver's license or the passport, or other types of IDs issued by the United States agencies as used in this section. So each public law will always have its own definition of what the intent of certain words mean, rather than you going to the Black's Law Dictionary. The term identification document means a document made or issued by or under the authority of the United States government, a state political, aka state of so-and-so, a state political subdivision of a state, a foreign government, political subdivision of a foreign government, an international government, or an international quasi-governmental organization, which, when completed with information concerning a particular individual, is of a type intended or commonly accepted for the purpose of identification of an individual. Here's a summary. If you're doing commerce with your own private ID, make sure that it does not bear a date of birth. Because we all know ever so loosely that birth means death because you were docked, and they're using the C's, and the doctor was the one who, the dock means dock like a ship, and then the doctor was the one who took you out of the mother's water in commerce. They created a birth certificate, all that stuff. We know all that. But when it comes to the functional application of all that, when you ask someone, they don't tell you. They tell you birth means death because of the birth certificate is an entity of an ens legal. It's a dead entity. So birth really means death. And you tell them, all right, cool, not a problem. Well, how do you functionally put that to use in functional commerce privately? To know information is one thing, but not having assets to live life comfortable is another choice, which you'll find most people just accumulating information, and the information is not making their lives better. I'm showing you how you can use all that rudimentary introductory information to use. Don't put a birth date. We know the birth date in commerce technically means a death date, so don't put it. And guess what? They are telling you not to, because that is their methodology. That is their original intellectual creative format. And they're telling you, in order for there to not be a conflict of interest in commerce when it comes to identification, and you want to function privately, don't put a birth date on the ID. And secondly, make sure you delineate that it is not a government document. I will go one step ahead and qualify what this government document means. But nonetheless, overall, you can use your private ID. Just make sure that it does not have the design or semblance of any United States ID. 2, make sure that it does not bear a birth date. 3, make sure that it has this verbiage on it. That is the public law that's been shared with you regarding the tricks and traps of private ID that they've set for you under the category of fraud and related activities connected with identification document. If you're gung-ho and you're running about saying we have our right to have our own private instrument, private ID, like people are doing promissory notes, and you're just creating it without really knowing the traps set forth for you, you're going into a battle without understanding the nature of the terrain. Remember, everything on here on YouTube are introductory. Even though they are introductory, 9 out of 10 times you probably wouldn't get in other venues. These things, no one is talking about it. And if they do, they speak about it from a speculative, spurious perspective. They don't show you the actual foundational principles behind it. They don't show you the terms and conditions behind it. Nor do they break down how you can actually function with it. You can go out there in the real world and do something with it, with your life. And even though no one really speaks in details like this, it is nonetheless introductory. Trust me, all these are rudimentary, basic, 101s. If you want some more and deeper details, come on over to my Patreon. I will show you more. Best of luck.